Hello and welcome to the Health Odyssey podcast, episode 229. We are continuing our fascinating conversation with Paul Mcllroy, and this is his seventh appearance on the Health Odyssey podcast. Okay, so that's one individual episode and three double bills. So we're continuing. So I will say, if you haven't listened to the last one, 227, go back because this is a direct continuation from episode 228. Sorry, this is a direct. This is getting confused. This is a direct continuation from episode 228.
What
This is
what we
episode
should have done
229.
is we should have done it strictly and all gone and got changed. Then pretended it was like a week later or something.
Yes, no, we're off. Yes, so we ended that episode just then, and you explained the saga of lifter A and lifter B, and the way that lifter A is using his 10 rep max, his or her 10 rep max, to do 3 sets maximally, pretty much hitting failure on each set, and they may get, on a good day, say a 10, a 7, and a 5, something like that. Whereas lifter B has built up by using exactly the same weight and started with, say, 20 sets of 3 with that weight, and then is able to progress both load and volume to potentially 20 sets of 6. So what I was going to ask, what was one of the things, it's one of the cornerstones of strength training, I suppose, and it's how your Perpetual Strength book and your comfort zone expansion system fits in with the principle of progressive overload, which is kind of what everyone is taught as, well, this is the only way you get bigger and stronger, is progressive overload, which is kind of to continually lift more weights for more sets, for more reps, and kind of create this overload stimulus on the body. So can you maybe talk around that a little bit for us?
Yeah, well, progressive overload is definitely a very real thing, and it probably is the single most important thing in programming. However, how it's applied most effectively is what's open for debate, and um, that is a movable feast depending on who we're talking about, right? Which is one of the premises in the book is that there are beginner, intermediate, and advanced programs, you know, and even within comfort zone expansion, there are levels, right? There's loads of different. You guys have been training with me for 3 or 4 years each, and you know that progressive overload is an ever-present thing, in that I'm always trying to find ways to add load to what it is you're doing, because ultimately, the name of the game is to be getting stronger within the volume that is relevant to the goal, right? So if you're trying to get stronger without adding a single ounce of muscle, then you're trying to increase neurological efficiency within relatively low volumes. And that may be anywhere between an infrequent, a moderate frequency, or a high frequency um, training program, depending on proximity to failure, right? So obviously, the more distal to failure, the more frequent the program can be, and the more proximal to failure, the less frequent it can be, right? But if you're training for size and strength, or even predominantly the goal is size, then you're going to have to find ways to get strong, like a most reliable way to improve muscle, to increase muscle, is to increase strength within the loading, within the volume parameters and frequencies that are, and densities for that, quite frankly, that are most closely associated with muscle growth, right? And there are different ways, therefore, to expand the comfort zone and different paces, right? The principle of starting in relative comfort and progressing in such a way that doesn't elicit a threat response from the central nervous system is the common denominator throughout all comfort zone expansion based programs. But it is in many ways more difficult to expand the comfort zone in haste. A great example of that would be the Amazing 12 program, because I've got to get huge body transformation results, which a body transformation is literally only two things. It's gaining muscle and losing fat, right? And the perceived success of it, both by the client and by the public and by the trainer, is directly proportional to the magnitude of which you can do those two things, right? And you've got to do them within 12 weeks or less in order to be able to deliver what it says on that particular tin, which is one of the reasons why there's so many different programs within the A12 program. It's way more complex to do that than it is to do what I've done, believe it or not, in Perpetual Strength, which is the polar opposite, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to do it, right? Was to show the versatility as well of the comfort zone expansion method. It can be used for the hasten results, ironically, right? Ironically, because 12 weeks isn't that long. That's just look at the A12 for a second. When you look at the amount of muscle and strength and performance that some of these guys gain, 12 weeks is a very short space of time with which to elicit that, right? But not a single workout is emphasizing failure or trying to force a peak. But it has to be a bit more aggressive in terms of the volume, density, and intensity progressions. It has to be, because you've only got 12 weeks. So when you take the time limit off, it's actually even easier to keep it going and to expand that base. And that's perpetual strength, right? And muscle growth is something like progressive overload has to happen at some point if muscle growth is the goal, right? It doesn't have to happen to cause muscle growth. But if you're going to try and sustain any sort of long-term muscle growth, or you're going to try and shoot for the most profound muscle growth that you can get in any given time period, right? It's even more important if the time period is short, like 12 weeks or less. But the longer we project that out, it's still important to be getting stronger for reps if you want to get bigger. However, how aggressively you're going to do that is going to be directly proportional to your training age, which is why the beginner programs are the most aggressive progression patterns in Perpetual Strength, my book, which is surprising to some people because it's kind of inverse to what you would normally think. Oh, the advanced guys have to be more aggressive. Well, it depends. If the advanced guy has something that's in 6 weeks, then yeah, he doesn't really have time to do anything else. But if the advanced guy is trying to get stronger by the most amount possible over 10 years, which is almost everybody who trains, like it's literally almost everyone who trains anywhere, then he's got to take a less aggressive approach to it because he spent all his aggression cards. He spent all his fast gains, his newbie gains. They're long gone, right? So increased time spent training in comfort, like we discussed in the first half of this podcast, the last episode, is directly proportional to the magnitude of progress that the strength cycle allows you to actualize and manifest. And if you're going to try and build the most amount of muscle possible over the long term, then you're going to have to organize it in such a way that you're able to progress for as long as possible without it getting aggressive and tripping a threat response from the central nervous system. Now, Perpetual Strength's main goal is strength, but I talk a lot about how to get bigger as well. And ironically, the training programs for the beginners and the intermediates could be used with advanced or lower level advanced lifters who haven't experienced that type of cycling before, so it's new to them, whose main goal is growth, right? Because they're higher volume, they're more aggressive, they emphasize progressive overload that wee bit more. And if you start at the right percentage, you can potentially get a lot of growth out of those. However, adding weight isn't the only way to get stronger. And so therefore, adding weight for volume isn't the only way to get bigger. All you have to do is lower the RPE of certainly for strength, all you have to do is lower the RPE of what represents a specific percentage of your 1RM. and you will have simultaneously lowered the RPE of, and therefore the actual literal percentage of every percentage of your 1RM up to and including 100%. Think about it. It's literally impossible to lower the RPE of what represents, or what I should say used to represent 75% of your 1RM, or even 70%, and not affect the other percentages north and south of it. It's literally impossible. Now, the most immediately affected will be the ones most immediately north and south of it. So if we're taking 70% as an example, and we lower the RPE of 70%, so it feels more like 60% used to, then what used to be 80% is going to be most effective, most up, affected most up to that point, let's say. And what used to be 60 or 50% is going to be most affected. But you're still going to have an impact on 100%. You can't not. And if you want to have a proportionate impact on 100% that you did on 70, 75, 80, all that requires is a peaking cycle to actualize the full extent of the strength that you've gained. Yeah. And so if you're doing that within the realm, within the volumes that are conducive to muscle growth, you will also be bigger. It's pretty much as simple as that.
Can I ask then, in terms of, I mean, I've found myself, I mean, would you say if you had no need to peak for a competition, a sport, or anything like that, that really within if you gave yourself a 5-year period of consistent training following a perpetual strength comfort zone expansion program, because I just know the weights that I'm dealing with now compared to when I started training with you, like where, just as an example, I think my 1 rep max on a deadlift, and I think I'd only done it once in my life when I started with you, was like 130 kilos. And now in my
It's hard to believe.
yeah, and now in my mind, I think I never thought I would say this, but I think it's possible for me to deadlift 200 kilos, yeah, or
Yeah,
more.
100%. Yeah.
And but it's a kind of in your mind, isn't it? You kind of, when you're right down there, you think, well, that's never going to happen. That's impossible. But now that I'm kind of dealing with like maybe 160, 170 kilos at times, I think actually 200 is not out of the realm of possibility. So you open up that possibility in your mind. But we've never really peaked a deadlift to fail. I try not to ever, I never really fail in reps in the programs you give me. So I think if you could have like a 5-year or a 10-year, I don't know, Pete said about, the 20-year program in the book and things. If you had a 5-year or a 10-year program without peaking, then like you say, your former, what you could only previously dream of as a 1 rep max will just become a working weight and a working set, in an
100%.
Yeah. So
I mean, the weighter the base gets, the way I used to put it 10 years ago, and it still holds true today as it used to be before I started talking about pyramids and stuff like that, is that the more your comfort zone expands, it eventually envelops your limits, right? If what used to represent comfortable is a balloon, right, and what used to represent a peak exists beyond the balloon, it's like the expanding universe. The universe will if this is a finite, a limit is always finite within the realms of its own limit, right? And if what you're training is a process, so it's in flux, it can go up or down, and if it's ever expanding, it will eventually go beyond where the limit used to be, right? And it's way easier to expand the base than it is to try and force your head through a limit by going real close to it. And as we discussed in the last episode, for reasons that we only partially understand, really, to tell you the truth, the central nervous system seems to act as this governor of protection against our own strength levels, right? And, it's been observable for decades that the most effective strength programs had one common denominator, and that was increased time spent training submaximally in relative comfort, right? So if we take away the peak altogether, or the need to do it, we take away the need then to back cycle frequently. You will have to back cycle at some point, don't get me wrong, comfort zone expansion based programs are still strength cycles, but they're on a completely different time scale with a totally different emphasis. And that's the key. And then also the manipulation of the maths around how to expand the comfort zone is individual, right? It's not like my way of doing it's uniquely my way, but it's not. I'm still manipulating the same variables that every other strength programmer is manipulating. If that makes any sense. It's like a Muay Thai coach, a great Muay Thai coach, Frankie McConville, who was once my Muay Thai coach, described how you learn Muay Thai. He says there is only is a certain amount of basic moves. It's like learning a musical instrument. Once you learn all the keys, you then go and make the music up on your own, right? So strength programming is much like that, right? Everybody knows the keys, right? But what way we make up the music is the difference between Beethoven and Barbie girl or Mr. Blobby, right?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So there's a great variance in the ability to do that. But yeah, eventually, if you can expand that comfort zone long enough, it will envelop what used to be your previous limit. And I'm a case study of one when it comes to the 20-year program. As I showed you at the end of that workshop, it was maybe a total of 15 years or something like that took me from a 1 rep maximum in a 40 kilo kettlebell strict press to a really soft 40 reps. Like when I say soft, I mean it was massively submaximal. I encourage anybody to go and watch it on YouTube, not because I'm trying to show off, but just so that you can see that the 40th rep looked like the first, and understand that took. Well, it was a 4-year cycle that led to that, but really it was 10 years of undulating expansion of the comfort zone before that facilitated that 4-year peak, right? Think about that, right? I had a 4-year
But like you say, that
cycle.
wasn't even like a peak because you didn't reach.
No.
You didn't fail, did you? You didn't fail a rep.
No.
You didn't, yeah. So
No.
yeah.
Do you know? It was so much so because every time, every workout, and every set, and every competition, every circumstance that sees you display your maximum, especially your 1 rep maximum, but your any rep maximum, is several sessions wasted that could have been used raising it. That's something that I say a lot, right? Because neurologically, there's a hit, there's a debt. And as I said at the start of the last episode, the stronger you are, the bigger the debt, right? The longer it takes. The older you are, the bigger the debt. The bigger your muscles are, the bigger the debt. And if you put them all together and you're an old, big, strong guy, right?
I think you mentioned him a few times, but I think Eddie Hall, after he did that 500 kilo deadlift, said he was right for like a number of months after that.
Yeah.
After that, maybe 3 or 4 months, he was not right after that deadlift. So,
Yeah. And emotionally as well. Like, even though that 40 with 40, at 40, which I did a number of years ago, with the strict press with the kettlebells, that was like 4.5 minutes, 4 minutes 45 seconds sitting in a rack position with an 88-pound kettlebell. Just digging into your forearm. And you guys have now, probably better than most, an idea of what an effective rack is and what it allows you to do. It allows you to turn your body into a power rack. We discussed this on the Mastering the Kettlebell Press podcast. But it extends your ability to suffer, right? And it also, which you pointed out aptly at the workshop, James, even though the muscles, the prime movers, aren't necessarily under continuous tension because you're searching for rest in the rack position, the nervous system, the skeletal structure, everything else is under load. So there's you're never out of load, right? So that took a tremendous toll on me, even though it was really submaximal, because it was still almost half my body weight for 40 continuous strict presses while standing with it on my arm for nearly 5 minutes. Without moving, without changing hands. And the psychological, posting all the time, I'm going to do this 40 with 40, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it. Once I'd done it, I remember going, I don't want to look at a kettlebell press for at least 2 months. Like I don't even want to look at one. I remember a friend of mine and one of my business partners, Sean Greeley. I said, I think I could do 44 with 44. Like I had the ability to do it, or potentially 48 with 48. And he was like, so he's American, Irish American. He's like, do it, man, just do it like that. And I'm like, I wouldn't be able to even do the 40 with 40 now, even though it was so easy, because I am now psychologically and emotionally checked out. I have checked out of that. I literally want to vomit if I even pick up a kettlebell to do a press to that point. So, although those are two extreme examples of me doing that, and Eddie Hall, even more extreme example, every time we go to failure, it kind of has that chipping away effect at our resolve, both neurologically, physiologically, and psychologically and emotionally. Do you know, and it just gets harder and harder to top your best. Like, how you ever, and what other aspect of life are you expected to go beyond your limit every single time you do it? It's the most suboptimal way to go about anything, really.
It's funny because what I'm thinking, everything you've just been saying there, what I'm thinking, right, is like the 60, 65, 70-year-old person who can just do pull-ups in a park, and you watch them do it and they can do 10 or whatever. And you're like, wow, that is amazing. I want to be able to do that at your age. And those aren't the people. I mean, there won't be the people like in the past, but they won't be the people now who are all over Instagram posting how heavy they can lift and all that. There'll be people just doing it in the background every day. They'll nip down the park, do some stretching, do some of this, do some of that, and just be consistent with it. And then it's like, how can you do that when you're 70? It's like, well, because I started when I was 30 or 40 or whatever.
Yes.
And I just got on with it, And
yes,
it's the way I see it now is like everyone's trying to show what they can do, and it's like, well, there's no point.
Yeah. Well, here's something that's interesting. Here's something that's interesting that I will offer you both and anybody else who's listening or watching. It doesn't have, just because you're getting older. So you said something there, and I know the way you meant it, but I don't want anybody listening to this confusing what you meant with what they may think you mean. So here's what I'm going to say. Just because you're getting older doesn't mean to say you can't be doing impressive feats or lifting heavy weights, right? Heavy weights themselves, all other things being equal, the heavier a load gets, the more dangerous it is. That's a fact, right? Even if its proximity to danger is distal, it's still going to be more proximal than it would have been if it was later. That's just true. That's just a fact, right? However, proximity to failure, the relative difficulty that it was to lift it when you lifted it, how comfortable it was, where it sits relative to your absolute limit is more important than the total load on the bar in terms of how injurious it can be. Because if it's not going to failure, then it's not happening in the presence of significant fatigue. And if it's easy to lift for the number of reps that you're doing, then it wasn't heavy relative to your muscles and connective tissues' ability to exert themselves, right? And if you're well recovered when you do it, and you're more likely to be well recovered when it's not that difficult in the first place, then everything is pushing back its ability to hurt you and increasing the probability that you won't be hurt, right? So I don't like it when I hear certain, I know you didn't say this, but I don't like it. I saw it as an opportunity to address a general point when even some educated fitness and strength personalities out there say that when you hit your 40s, you can't train the same way you did in your 20s. When you hit your 50s or 60s, you can't be lifting heavy weights and training the same way you did in your 20s. Well, only if you were training suboptimally in your 20s in the first place. Yes, right. Yes, because what's suboptimal and dangerous in your 20s does become more dangerous in your 30s, does become more dangerous in your 40s, so on and so forth, right? But if you're training to expand the comfort zone in the first place And if every single set carries a very low risk, and you've been getting stronger for decades and are now lifting much heavier and more impressive weights than you did in your 20s, but the relative difficulty and proximity to failure is the same, which is submaximal and distal to failure, then you should be fine, right? Or at least the probability of you getting injured is much lower than the guys who are so-called training safer, who are the same age as you, right? Do you know? And you're also, your training is way more productive. You're potentially still getting stronger, while everybody else has settled for this sort of, I'm going to try to not get old workout. Do you know? We're still getting stronger.
That is exactly what I meant. I was going to say, when you were talking all the way, I was going to say, yeah, that's what I meant. But that is what I meant. Is, so the 70-year-old guy doing pull-ups in the park has been progressively overloading for years, but within his comfort zone or her comfort zone. I did a video on this the other day, and it made me think of Life of Brian in his or her comfort zone. Anyway, when he or she, but yeah, so they're doing them pull-ups, but they've been because I talk about this a lot in my 30s. So 10 years ago, so late 30s, if I'd have stayed there, in my decline, where would I have been now if I hadn't have done what I did? Whereas we talk about this with age all the time, don't we? And you get to a certain point and people think there's no turning back. And it's like, yeah, but what you can do, even if you are declining, you can slow the decline.
Yes.
Right? So it doesn't matter how old you are, but that person doing all those pull-ups in the park is exactly what you've been talking about. They've just no ego, no nothing. They've just trained and progressively got better year after year after year after year after year. So a 70-year-old doing 10 pull-ups looks amazing. It's like they might have been able to do 40 when they were 40, but 10 is impressive at 70. You know, and they'll be like, "Oh, I'm not as good as I used to be." It's like, yeah, but you're this much way above like everyone else, and that should be. That's where that should be the average, in my opinion, for everybody who gets there, without neurological issues and all this sort of stuff. That should be the average.
Yes. I mean, listen, and that's the average and potentially the minimum, because here's the exciting part. So I'll say two things. You might have something to envy me about, right? And I definitely have something to envy you about. So here's what I'm going to discuss, right? There's biological age, there's training age, right? And because I started in a serious, progressive, and consistent way at a much younger biological age than maybe you did, right? And I'm pretty sure you maybe messed about with training in your 20s and earlier 30s. Did something? No?
Nah.
Wow.
I drank a lot and smoked a lot and did a bit of running.
Training your liver? Okay.
Yeah, did a bit of running.
Your liver was getting some serious conditioning. But no, but that's good. But so that you've got a relatively young training age of 10 years or so, right?
Yeah, about that, yeah.
Right? So you're a 10-year-old when it comes to training. I'm a 31, 32-year-old, right? So although that has given me a lot to now have at this age in terms of strength, I have less progress to make than you, even though you're a few years older than me, right? Couple of years. Anyway, do you know? So you're a much younger training age than me. I suspect James might be a slightly younger training age even than me. So here's the thing. I'm a great example, even though it's just me, of what comfort zone expansion might have. Just that subtle change. It's still strength cycling. I'm not saying I reinvented the wheel. I just changed the efficiency of the ball bearings, right? It's still a wheel, but it works in a slightly different way. It's a slightly newer model of the same idea, right? An expansion, some would say, on the same idea. And we still haven't had a chance to see, really, en masse. Okay, there's been like 15,000 people or more have done the A12. I've trained maybe a few thousand or more in person and online in different places. but really that's a relatively small number, right? We haven't had a real chance to see what comfort zone expansion strength cycling can do long term for people. We are now the perfect test subjects, being in our 40s, to take this forward, to see just how high the peak can actually go. How old can you actually be before you're now fighting the dying of the light? Right? When does that light actually start to die, regardless of what you're doing? It has to at some point, because we're finite creatures. We die, we're mortal, and our mortality, death and taxes are the two only guarantees in this life, right? However, lifespan and health span are two different things, and strength span, performance span is something else as well, which is heavily and closely linked to both those things, but is also independent from them. How strong, how much, many more years, how old can we get and still be getting better, right? Because you are a kid, you are an example of somebody who didn't do much when they were younger, and a cynic might say, well, if you had started in your 20s, you would have peaked in your late 20s, and then, you'd maybe be a bit stronger than you are now, but you'd be starting to go downhill, right? However, I've been doing this, guys, consistently since the 1990s, and I'm in my mid-40s, and every single year of my life, I've gotten stronger, including this year. So, right, and you were training for 6 or 7 years before you started with me, but the up curve in your strength in the past 3 years has been phenomenal. So I'm not saying it's oh, I'm this, I'm that. It's the strength, it's the emphasis on the comfort zone expansion strength programming thought process. Hopefully there's guys out there who listen to this who are better than me, who'll take this ethos and take it further than I did. Do you know? That's my goal, right? To be a shoulder. To be a shoulder potentially. Right?
I was watching
that
at the
would be
weekend.
cool. But
Yeah,
I'm not done. I'm not done yet myself.
I was watching at the weekend the official strongman games from America, and Mark Felix won the over 50s, and he's 58 now, and he was in the over 50s, and he won. And at 58 years of age, I think he did like 11 reps with, God, I don't know, 280 kilos or more probably, in a minute. And at the end he took his top off, and he's 58 and he looks in great, and they call him like the miracle man, don't they?
I look at him and I wonder what his training's like, because potentially
he's a plasterer as well. He's a full-time plasterer as well.
Yeah, but potentially, the way people talk is training to be world's strongest man like shortens your lifespan.
Yeah.
Does it? Because we don't know, because he's 58, which isn't old. It's old for a strong man, but it's not old, is it? But I'm saying I'm closer to it than you are. But what does he train? Does he train to the same extent as the other bigger guys or whatever, or is he just genetically gifted, or what? I mean,
it's definitely a lot of things. It's like anything. It's a multifactorial situation. Mark Felix is a beautiful example, because not only is Mark Felix the best now, 3 years in a row, I believe, over 50s world's strongest man, but he still, to my knowledge, could be wrong, but don't think him, holds a couple of absolute records that he set relatively recently in the Hercules hold. Like, he has grip world records that are just the best in the world, regardless of age, that are better than the guys in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and he's nearly 60, right? It's just incredible. And could his training be even more, is he expanding his comfort zone? I've got to believe he's strength cycling, which is a form of comfort zone expansion programming, because in order to get stronger, you have to spend that time training in relative comfort. But I'm just wondering, I can almost guarantee he's not doing this type of approach. And if he was, he could potentially go even further, even longer. It's absolutely incredible.
It was just a couple of weekends ago, I think, in Birmingham. He had these 2 Thomas inch dumbbells, the really fat grip dumbbells, and you had to pick them up and farmers walk them for as long as you could. and he went head to head with, I think, Paddy Haynes, who's like a young strongman who's really well known for his grip training at the moment. And Mark Felix absolutely, like, he set a new world record, and he just kept walking with his hands are like this.
He's
You know,
got
like,
12-inch hands. Yeah.
But
yeah,
Yeah.
huge
he's
hands.
only
Yeah.
he's only just retired from competing in the actual
World's strongest man. Yeah,
world's strongest man,
Yeah.
hasn't he, as well? So it's like it's
Yeah.
amazing.
yeah.
Just
Dude.
insane, you know. And again, you know, strongman and high-end professional strength sports being associated with shorter lifespans, you know, you can't really, you definitely can't throw all that at the feet of the training. You know, like these guys, for a start, bigger men, bigger animals, generally don't live as long. Like bigger dogs, like a Great Dane, Irish Wolfhound, St. Bernard, things like that don't live as long as like a Jack Russell, right? Because it requires more of your heart to oxygenate the bigger tissue, the enormous amount of tissue. So the bigger you are, just in general, you know, Pete's going to live to 100.
I was going to say, I'm like one of them
sorry.
little one of them little wire-head terriers that keeps going away at your leg. That, like the little
I'm only
annoying
joking.
ones.
I'm only joking. I couldn't resist that. Sorry, I'm Irish. But no. And then you've got performance enhancing drugs. You've got the huge amounts of food that these guys have to eat. And it's not all clean because it can't be, because the body fat is also facilitative to strength. When you get beyond a certain point, weight moves weight, load, you know, mass moves mass, and a power belly is a real thing. Do you know, like if you're talking about absolute strength, you're not talking about relative pound for pound strength, which in the open strongman, that's what you're talking about. So there's multiple things that are contributing towards shortening the length span of strongmen, but probably the least contributing factor is their training. However, again, sport and health are two different things, you know, especially when you're going to an absolute limit in competition, which these guys generally have to at some point in competition.
Yeah. What we'll do, Paul, can we, before we'll wrap up in about 10 minutes if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
It's getting dark. You started and it was in
I know.
daylight.
I can turn a light on if you want. It'll take 2
Turn a
seconds.
light on if you want. Yeah, you're starting to
Yeah, okay.
I'll send you this in a bit, but I've just taken a photograph of what Paul
I was
would look
gonna
like if he's
say,
bald. Because
yeah,
you know, your hair there,
better.
Paul. I've just taken a picture. I'll send it to you later. If you want to look like what you're going to look like when you look like James and you're bald, your hair was exactly the same color as the background. Straight away.
yeah. I was going to say, you started in the daylight and then you were like in pitch black. Yeah, so what I wanted to maybe touch on is in the last maybe 10 minutes, the exercise selection that you use in the book. So Perpetual Strength is obviously, like I say, it's your theory and philosophy behind training, but then there's also programs in there which obviously are based upon certain exercises, and you use the powerlifting exercises as the base, or the kind of the mainstay of the programming, and then there's a few assistance exercises as well. But do you want to explain maybe why you choose, so is you know, squat, bench, deadlift, three big exercises, the main exercises, why you've used those exercises for Perpetual Strength, just for the listener to kind of get an understanding of that, if that's okay.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, there's several reasons why. For a start, a barbell is probably the most cost-effective, accessible, and overall, like a kettlebell is probably more versatile, but it becomes versatile for things outside of what you would typically want a barbell for anyway. So in terms of versatility for bodybuilding and powerlifting purposes, or just getting really strong and jacked, there's nothing really beats a barbell in terms of mainly its adjustability, in that you can make very small load increments. So anytime an implement is more adjustable in terms of load, it becomes more programmable. Simply because, you know, micro progressions become easier to apply. And also strength and size, it's not just about the total weight that you're lifting. It's also about it also seems to correlate with the stress or the relative taxing ability on both the soft tissue and the central nervous system. And like I've trained with almost every implement that there is. I know you asked me about the exercise, and I'm now talking about the implement, which is something different.
Right, but
But
that's
I'm gonna
yeah.
I'm gonna get to the exercises in a minute because it all plays into itself. Like I've lifted 5 plates aside, let's say, on a hammer strength bench press for like 10 reps, full range of motion, and that's 10, what's that, 200 kilos plus the weight of the arms itself, so maybe 230 or something like that for 10 reps. I wouldn't get anything remotely close to that on a barbell for that many reps or even for 1 rep, right? The leverage of that machine, like some of the case that people make for using machines over using barbells is that you can use a higher load on the machine, but the perception of that load by the central nervous system and the stress that it puts on the body is nowhere remotely close. And the amount of weight that you have to put on the machine, even to get less of an effect in that regard, is astronomical, right? Not to mention the space the damn thing takes up. And we're talking about a plate loaded machine, which usually comes in 5 to 10 kilo increments. Yes, you can add small plates to the top of it. You can use magnets. You can get creative, but it's just not as progressible. The barbell is king, and there's a special kind of stress that gets put on the nervous system, like almost a primal reaction to having an external load, which could, in fact, kill you if you do it wrong, right? Coming down on you that you're lifting off. Certainly, in terms of realistic, real world, hate using the word, but I'm going to functional strength. There's nothing kind of beats an externally loaded object, right? An exogenous weight that you're lifting outside of your body. It mimics lifting a rock or a log or a human or a car, whatever you're doing outside where you have to exert force. It mimics a sport, a survival situation, but yet it's in this kind of nice, balanced, easily progressible, very easily adjustable way, right? So once you've nailed the implement, right, you then have to look at the exercises that cover the most real estate, right? The Perpetual Strength book is main focus is strength, but there's tons in it that will cause hypertrophy. But it's not a hypertrophy focused book. I just wanted to make loads of points about hypertrophy and comfort zone expansion. I think I've made them well, and I think if you follow those directions, and particularly some of the beginner intermediate programs, you'll definitely get bigger. But its main focus is strength, right? And if I was putting together a more ideal hypertrophy program, it would look more like the Amazing 12, maybe with a longer drawn out training effect. Like we have the A12 Classic, we have the A12 Express, which attempts to do it even faster. And then we have the A12 for Life, which kind of looks more like Perpetual Strength in terms of the programming, right? But it's not the same programming, but it has that sort of long-term ethos to it, but for a bodybuilding focus, right? The big 3 hit the most muscles in one go. So in terms of time efficiency, they're the best. In terms of strengthening human movement patterns that are most widely applicable to other movement patterns that are either close to it or vastly different from it, they're the best. What do I mean by that? I mean, if so-and-so, if lifter A does a bunch of like hard to adjust, load limiting, sport specific loaded movement patterns that try to really, really tightly mimic a sporting performance, like a golfer using like a, like one of those clubs you swing, for doing like mace work, and trying to like mimic a movement pattern, right? And gets better at that, right? But I take a genetic clone and skill clone of this individual over here and improve their deadlift by 100 pounds. by 200 pounds, improve their squat by 50, 60%, improve their bench press by something similar. Not only will they drive the ball further, all other things being equal from a skill perspective and a glove technology perspective, but they'll likely swing that mace with a heavier mace as well, because the rising tide raises all ships. And so it's about nailing your colours to the tide that rises the fastest. And it's easier to make a bench press, a squat, and a deadlift stronger, quicker, because the load increments represent a smaller percentage of the maximum amount of weight you can lift on those exercises, because the poundage potential for them are far higher, right? Like, what's the maximum golf club weighted swing that you can do? 5 kilos? Potentially, like, without the movement pattern breaking the shit, no matter how strong you are. Right, but what's the maximum deadlift you can do? Well, Eddie Hall did 500 kilos, right? So, assuming Eddie Hall had the same skill as that guy, I can guarantee he drives the ball further. Do you know what I'm saying? So that's why those three.
And then I'd have to say one of the things I was going to ask, the Superman extensions that you've got in there, which I did them on Monday, and I have to say my abs are still sore from Monday. It's Thursday today, so I hadn't done them for a while. But those, it was triceps and it was abs. And I was going to ask, is that because I hadn't done a lot of kettlebell pressing recently, but I did that today actually. And do those Superman extensions, are they going to help with an overhead press? Definitely, yeah.
They're going to help with anything that involves pressing, and especially freestanding presses, because the midsection is so involved in overhead strength, and the midsection can't help but be involved in the exercise that I coined the phrase Superman extension. Didn't invent that exercise. First person I saw doing it was a powerlifting world champion called Mike Joseph. I was competing in the same world drug-free powerlifting championships as this guy over 20 years ago. And he had a 200 kilo bench press raw at 80 kilos body weight, drug-free. And so anything I seen him doing, I sort of paid attention to when it came to, remember at this point, I'm in my early 20s as well. And Mike was older and a bit bigger. And he was doing this exercise off like a power rack, Yeah. I looked at it and thought, yep. And the second person I seen do something similar was an early YouTube sensation called Hannibal for King. This fella who did, remember Hannibal?
Is he like a black calisthenics guy?
Yeah, yes, from New York.
Like that up to here.
Yes. And he was doing those off the bottom rung of a monkey bar ladder, which was maybe, I don't know, 10 inches off the floor, with his body totally out. And I thought, well, when he's like this, he looks like Superman. Looks he's flying through the sky like so. And I thought, okay, Superman extensions. And then I thought, right, well, he is a superhuman, and so is Mike Joseph. So how can I make this scalable? And I was able to do them from that depth the first time I tried as well. And then I thought, well, but if my granny was going to do this, how would I do it? So the higher up they are, the easier it gets, and the closer your hands are to your feet are to your hands, the easier it gets. So you've got two methods to progress them, and you can actually potentially be even more incremental with a Superman extension than you can a barbell, because you don't only have to drop down by an inch, you can also adjust your feet in and out by a centimeter if you want, and mark it with chalk or a piece of tape or something like that, and be super progressive with it. And that's one of the mainstay exercises in the A12. It's in Perpetual Strength. I have you doing it. I have other people doing it. It's a moving plank, which I think works the abs harder than just a plank, right? Because you're dynamically having to think about contracting your tricep. Incredible tricep exercise, by the way. Depending on what way you angle your head, you can make it have an overhead French press effect or a lying down skull crusher effect, depending on what way you lower yourself and where the angle of your elbows are relative to where your head is. It's just so versatile, and it requires almost nothing. You can do them off kitchen chairs, stairs, in a park bench, anything like that, and it might surprise some people to realize that There are no abdominal exercises, no direct abdominal exercises in the Amazing 12 program. Yet everybody has these like big thick six packs, and that's because every exercise is an abdominal exercise. If you learn how to use intra-abdominal pressure and pressurize yourself right, but you have to teach that for an overhead press. Whereas when you're doing a Superman extension, it forces it, right?
Yeah, it's that is it like reflexive strength, isn't it? Because I did that. I think what happened was because on Monday I hadn't done them for a while, and I think it was on the lowest rung I've had it on, and I also intentionally like took my feet back further, and then
Yeah,
literally like today, even just today, right
it's
low,
insane.
like below my belly button, like really low. I'm like bloody hell, that's like
Funny
really
enough,
yeah.
I'm going to be very soon, a couple of weeks, maybe a month at the most. I'm going to be releasing an online group, right? Just around strength and conditioning training. It's going to be a private group that people come into, and I'm doing things like tiered lists of different exercises for different muscle groups, and I'm reviewing programs, famous books, and doing like deck presentations on them, and a lot of face to camera stuff like YouTube style videos. And one of the deck presentations is a tiered list of I'm going like bronze, silver, gold, platinum rated exercises for different body parts, and one of them's abdominals, right? And I've got the Superman extension, which is a tricep exercise, rated up high. I think I've had it in like the silver zone, and I could potentially move it to gold tier. But it literally is. I mean, if you're not used to that exercise and you go hard on it with high volume at a decent level, you're going to feel like somebody went up your abdominal wall with a Rambo knife the next day. Beautiful.
Right, we're gonna wrap up there. It's been about 2 hours. Well, 2 1 hour episodes. I think we've kind of done today. So we've been talking a lot, obviously, about perpetual strength. I'm holding it up again. This is Paul's book. It's absolutely fantastic. Available on dragondoor.com. Oh, Paul's holding it up as well. Pete, get a picture of us both holding it up. Hold it up. Hold it up. There you go. Let me get that out of the way there.
Hold it. There you go.
Go. Available on dragondoor.com. I'm sure if you type into Amazon by the time this comes out, because this will be out on episode 228, part 1 was out on the 10th of January. This episode 229 will be out on the 17th of January. I'm sure if you go onto Amazon and just type in Perpetual Strength Paul Mcllroy, you'll be able to get the hard copy or the ebook. Or if you just, like I said before, just go into any of your sort of search engines and whatnot and just type in Perpetual Strength Paul Mcllroy, it will come up. Paul, if people don't currently follow you on social media or anywhere and they want to follow you and just kind of find out more, what's your where do you kind of post most stuff at the moment?
I am terrible, as you guys know. I'm terrible with social media. You can follow me on Facebook. I'm most often at my friend's limit. It's just an ordinary Facebook profile with my name and me looking like this. You'll find me. I've got a T-shirt with a 12 on it. I look like this. It's my name. And then on Instagram, it's Paul Mcllroy at Paul Mcllroy Amazing 12. And then there's the website amazing12.com and the YouTube channel Paul Mcllroy, and there's also an Amazing 12 YouTube channel. So there's going to be this group on Facebook as well. To search for that. It's going to be Amazing 12 getting you elite results or something like that. Something to do with elite results.
Yeah.
It's coming sort of first, second week in January as well. It's been around the time these podcasts come out. And it's going to be focused solely on strength and conditioning content and hypertrophy content. So for free.
Excellent. That's fantastic. And then, like I said at the start of the previous episode, if you want to go back now and listen to any of Paul's previous podcasts with us, he started way back on episode 22, Unleashing the Superhuman You. And that was really all about Paul's origin story and his kind of growing up, I suppose, and his introduction to sport and strength and the genesis of the Amazing 12 program. We had the Mechanics of Strength part 1 and 2, which was episode 53 and 54. We had Mastering the Kettlebell Press, episode 185, and Building Pillars of Power, which was all about squats and deadlifts, 186. And then obviously these two episodes that we've done, episode 228 and 229, which will be named Perpetual Strength Part 1 and Perpetual Strength Part 2. So
love it.
Yeah, really great catching up with you again, Paul. It's been fantastic. And like I say, at the start of the first episode, we had a few issues with sound. I'm sure second episode was absolutely spot on. And as soon as we kind of got that sorted, it was all okay. So hopefully you enjoyed both of these episodes. Please do like, share, subscribe, leave a review if you're watching or listening on a platform that allows you to do so. Especially Apple Podcasts is where we're trying to get our reviews and things. We will be back next week with Nick Rainbird rejoining us. He's just come back from Poland, having done his Wim Hof training out in Poland. He's finished that off now, so he'll be back with us next week, and we'll be talking all things Wim Hof. But thank you so much, Paul. It's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you so much from both myself and Pete for being our coach for the last 3 to 4 years. We absolutely love it. We love a bit of volume, don't we, Pete?
We love a bit of what, sorry?
We love a bit of volume.
Yeah, I love a bit of comfort zone.
Expansion.
I do. One thing I'm going to say is what Paul said when we were on the workshop is your definition of comfort will probably have to change a little bit if you start doing this sort of programming, because people like comfort to be really comfortable. It's like no.
Yeah, no. It's relative to failure, right?
Yeah.
So in my book, in my like Hardman X combat strength athlete, combat sports athlete, Irishman book, what comfort means is you didn't go to failure. And then the proximity to failure dictates how comfortable it was. However, the stronger you get on something like squats, even if you're 5 reps in reserve, you're probably still breathing out your ears, and it was probably still pretty tough.
Yep, absolutely.
I'm gonna end it on that.
Fantastic. Guys, we will see you next week. Thank you for joining us, and thank you, Paul, for this another great double episode.
Thank you.
I'm sure we'll have you on again at some stage, and maybe we'll have you over in England for a workshop at some stage in the future.
Yes.
Which would be amazing for people to be able to meet you and train with you in person. Would be fantastic.
Thank you. I'm coming for Don John's record of 10.
Well, keep doing these double episodes.
These doubles,
Keep doing these double episodes, and you'll be there.
He's one for the doubles as well, though. Don, I know Don as well. He's long-winded like me. Gotta love it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Pete.
See you later.
And we will see you next week. Bye-bye.